Hey, sixth grade at Greater Latrobe School District. I'm excited to introduce you to another online art lesson. This one focuses on an artist from New York City who became famous in the 1980s. His name was Keith Haring, and Keith got his start down in the subways of New York City. What he did in the subway system was he took posters and advertisements, flipped them over to the empty backside, and drew some bold artworks on those. You can see in the artwork he's standing in front of that it features large, bold lines. And Keith always had a large marker on hand for when he was sketching down in the subway system of New York City. Eventually, he was considered one of the pop artists. Pop art was a movement in the 1980s. If you've ever been to Pittsburgh or heard of the artist Andy Warhol, there's a bridge in Pittsburgh named after Andy Warhol and a museum there as well. Andy Warhol was probably the most famous pop artist, but Keith Haring was in that group of artists as well and equally as famous. Let's look at what he did. So Keith's style featured a lot of figures, so those are shapes of bodies, and his artwork featured these sort of expression lines, these little hash mark lines around these figures, which sort of gave them the sense of movement. You're going to do that today in your project, which will feature three figures in the style, three body shapes in the style of Keith Haring. And hopefully, when you design yours will include some movement as well. So I'm going to slide these aside, get myself a blank paper in front of me, show you a tip for creating a figure in the style of Keith Haring, and that is to create a stick figure first. So if I was to just create a really light stick figure, remember that you can include knees and arms. So I came down here to the bottom first and did my legs, and then remember that there are elbows as part of our body which move different ways. And so I did that very, very lightly. Now with a darker pencil line, I'm going to go around there. At the end of my hands and feet, I'm going to toss a little bit of a round shape there to represent a hand or a foot. Again, I'm going around my stick figure lines. This is a way to help you as you get started. Some of you might notice as you get going with Keith Haring's style, you might not need that stick figure any longer, but it is a way to support you at first. And then you just erase that inside light stick figure. The lighter you draw it first, the easier it will be to remove later. Once you have removed it, you can decide, where am I going to put those little expression lines, those little gestural lines, which are just a few repeating lines after each other. Where do I want to toss those to represent some movement? Sometimes Keith would place those around the heads of his figures, sometimes at the end of a hand. Sometimes he would curve them around part of it. But either way, this is one figure. For you, boys and girls, for you sixth graders, I need you to do three of them. And I have an example of that up here. So I have created three figures in the style of Keith Haring. I have placed those expressionist movement lines around my figures. And then I want you to color, if you have color available. If you don't have color, you can skip this part. But I want you to choose three colors from the color wheel that are beside each other. So if I look at the color wheel here, three colors that are beside each other. The three that I chose were red, orange, and yellow. That's called an analogous color group. I'm going to say that once more. An analogous color group. It's any three colors that are beside each other on the wheel. My favorite is probably blue, green, and yellow. You could easily choose red, violet, and blue. In mine behind here, I'm choosing red, orange, and yellow. Again, that is an analogous color group, and some would say that because they are near each other on the color wheel, that they blend and are very easy on the eyes because they're beside each other. One thing I wanted to show you, 6th grade, if you have markers at home, if you have crayons at home, whatever material you're using, sometimes with a material, if you work neatly and go back and forth with that material, like you see me doing here with the markers, it is a little better than if you just had filled this in with a sort of scribbly effect and waited until you covered everything. Sometimes those marks are left behind. So one thing I want to ask you is try in this project to use the markers in a neat, organized way and see if you like that a little better. Again, you're going to do 3 figures, 3 body shapes in the style of the famous pop artist from New York City, Keith Haring, and then choose for yourself an analogous color group, 3 colors beside each other on the wheel, and you'll use those colors to color your figures. Where you place those expression or movement lines, those gestural lines around, is completely up to you. And I just noticed that I've got an empty hand up here in the air, so I'm going to toss a few extra around there. Enjoy this, 6th grade. Thank you for watching.